a quiet Texas border town where Friday night football meant everything and everyone knew your truck before they knew your name, Daniel Mercer lived a life so ordinary it was almost invisible. His small white house sat at the end of a gravel road, paint slightly faded from the southern sun, an American flag hanging neatly from the porch. Every morning at exactly 6 a.m., the porch light flicked on. Coffee brewed. The screen door creaked. Routine. Predictable. Safe. Daniel packed his 12-year-old son Tyler's lunch with careful precision. Turkey sandwich, no mustard, apple slices wrapped in a napkin so they wouldn't brown, and a handwritten note folded small enough to fit inside the paper bag. Be brave. Love you. Dad. He never missed a note. Not once. At school drop-off, he waited until Tyler walked through the doors before pulling away. Always watching. Always scanning. Even when he smiled and waved like every other parent in the pickup line. Most folks in town saw him as the quiet widower who kept to himself. He coached Little League on weekends, fixed neighbors' fences without charging a dime, and attended church but always sat in the back row. He didn't drink much, didn't talk politics, and never raised his voice. If someone asked about his past, he'd give the same answer every time. Did some time in the service. Nothing special. Then he'd change the subject. People respected that. In Texas, you don't push a man who doesn't want to talk. But there were things about Daniel that didn't quite fit the picture. He parked his truck facing the street, never the garage. He chose seats in restaurants with a clear view of every exit. Firearms were locked in a safe, but they were cleaned weekly, like clockwork. At exactly 3:17 a.m., almost every night, he woke up. No alarm. No noise. Just instinct. He'd sit upright in bed, breathing steady, listening to a silence that felt too loud. After a few minutes, he'd walk the perimeter of the house, checking windows, doors, shadows. In the garage, hidden behind shelves of paint cans and fishing gear, was a steel box bolted into concrete. It wasn't visible unless you knew exactly where to look. Daniel hadn't opened it in years. He told himself he never would again. That part of his life was over. Buried. The town saw a devoted father trying to build a peaceful life after loss. And Daniel worked hard every single day to make sure that's all they ever saw. Friday afternoons in town had a rhythm. School buses sighed to a stop. Screen doors slammed. Lawnmowers hummed in the distance. At 3:42 p.m., Daniel's truck was already parked in its usual spot outside Tyler's middle school. Engine off. Windows cracked. Eyes watching. He never used his phone while waiting. Never distracted. Just scanning faces as kids poured out in noisy waves. Backpacks. Laughter. Parents calling names. But that day, Tyler didn't come out. At first, Daniel didn't move. Sometimes Tyler stayed a few extra minutes talking to friends. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The parking lot thinned. The crossing guard packed up her sign. A tight pressure settled in Daniel's chest, not panic, just awareness sharpening. He stepped out of the truck and walked toward the entrance, calm on the outside, something colder underneath. The front office said Tyler left on time. Rode his bike like usual. Nothing unusual. Daniel drove the normal route home. Half a mile from their house, he saw it. Tyler's bike was lying on its side near the edge of the road, back wheel still slowly spinning in the dirt like it had just fallen. His backpack was a few feet away. One strap torn. Papers scattered. The world went quiet. No birds, no wind, just the hum of Daniel's engine idling behind him. He stepped out slowly, eyes scanning tree lines, rooftops, open fields. No skid marks. No obvious struggle. Too clean. Then he saw the phone. Crushed. Screen shattered. Like someone had stepped on it deliberately. Daniel crouched, picked up the bike, examined the chain, the handlebars, the ground. His breathing remained steady, but his mind was moving fast, angles, timing, direction of force. This wasn't random. This wasn't a runaway. This was controlled. Professional. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's when his own phone vibrated in his pocket. Unknown number. No caller ID. He answered without speaking. For 3 seconds, there was only static. Then a video message came through. Daniel watched without blinking. Tyler sat tied to a metal chair in a dimly lit room. His face streaked with tears, trying to be brave, trying not to cry too loud. Behind him stood 2 men with rifles, faces partially covered, tattoos crawling up their necks. One of them leaned toward the camera and smiled. Slow, deliberate. A voice, thick with a Mexican accent, spoke calmly. You crossed into our business, old man. Now we cross into yours. The video ended. A text followed seconds later. Wait for instructions. Daniel lowered the phone slowly. The Texas sun felt hotter now, pressing down on the back of his neck. Cars drove past in the distance, completely unaware that something had just shifted, something dangerous. His face didn't change. No shouting. No frantic calls. No visible fear. But his eyes. They were different. Still. Focused. Calculating. The cartel believed this was simple. Months earlier, one of their low-level transport routes had been disrupted near the outskirts of town. A quiet tip had reached Border Patrol about suspicious activity near an abandoned ranch property. The shipment was seized. 2 drivers arrested. It wasn't a major loss, just enough to sting. Enough to demand a message be sent. They traced the anonymous report back to a nearby cell tower ping. Narrowed it down to a handful of residents. Daniel Mercer's name surfaced. To them, he was just another civilian who got curious. Just another small-town dad who thought he was doing the right thing. They didn't dig deeper. They didn't check federal blacklists. They didn't know the name Daniel Mercer had once been scrubbed from public military records under classified directive. They didn't know that in certain Pentagon hallways, that name was spoken quietly, followed by silence. Years ago, Daniel had operated in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. Desert cities. Mountain compounds. Jungle corridors where the rules didn't apply and the missions didn't officially exist. When governments needed a problem erased without fingerprints, they called men like him. And Daniel had been very, very good at it. He wasn't infantry. He wasn't conventional forces. He was Tier 1, the kind of operator trained to dismantle networks, destabilize organizations, and vanish before sunrise. Multiple tours. Off-the-books assignments. Psychological endurance training designed to break most men in weeks. He survived all of it. Earned commendations he could never display. Buried teammates whose funerals were closed casket and quiet. When he finally left the service, it wasn't because he couldn't continue. It was because command believed he'd done enough damage for one lifetime. The cartel saw a widowed father living in a modest house with a pickup truck and a little league schedule taped to the fridge. What they didn't see was the discipline in the way he moved. The way his eyes mapped environments automatically. The way his garage shelves were positioned not just for storage, but for cover. They didn't see the faint scars across his ribs or the small burn mark near his wrist from a detonation that went wrong years ago in a country no one publicly admits we were in. To them, he was leverage. A pressure point. An easy target. They assumed he would panic. Call the police. Beg. Try to negotiate. They had dealt with desperate fathers before. They had never dealt with one who used to hunt warlords for a living. And somewhere south of the border, inside a concrete compound guarded by men who thought fear was their greatest weapon, laughter echoed through the halls. They replayed the video of Tyler crying. They joked about ransom numbers. They congratulated themselves on sending a clear message to the town. They had no idea the message had been received. And understood. Completely. The sun had fully set by the time Daniel pulled into his driveway. The house looked the same as it had that morning, porch light glowing, flag moving gently in the warm Texas wind. Normal. Peaceful. Almost mocking. He stepped inside and locked the door behind him with deliberate care. No rushing. No panic. He placed Tyler's crushed phone on the kitchen counter next to the lunch note that had never been read. For a long moment, he just stood there in the quiet hum of the refrigerator, staring at nothing. Then something inside him shifted. He walked to the garage and closed the door softly. The overhead light flickered on. Dust particles floated in the air like suspended time. Daniel moved toward the back wall where old storage shelves held paint cans, tools, fishing gear, the camouflage of a normal life. He began removing them one by one with mechanical precision. No hesitation. No wasted movement. Beneath the shelves was a reinforced steel hatch bolted into the concrete floor. He knelt. Entered a 6-digit code from memory. The lock clicked. Inside the hidden compartment was a past he had promised himself never to touch again. Black cases sealed airtight. Weapons wrapped in oilcloth. Ammunition organized by caliber and purpose. Night vision optics. Suppressors. A folded uniform patch bearing an insignia so classified it had never been photographed. At the very bottom sat a small wooden box. Inside it, a silver star, never displayed, never mentioned. Daniel stared at the metal for a moment before closing the box and setting it aside. This wasn't about honor. This wasn't about country. This was about his son. He selected his gear carefully, not excessive, not emotional. Efficient. 2 sidearms. 1 compact rifle. Body armor fitted to his exact measurements years ago. Everything still maintained. Still ready. Because men like Daniel never truly stopped preparing. They just hoped they'd never need to use it again. He stood and walked back inside the house, phone in hand. He scrolled through contacts until he found a number saved under no name, just a blank space. He hadn't called it in 8 years. His thumb hovered for half a second before pressing dial. It rang once. Twice. Then a voice answered. Calm. Older. Alert. Mercer. Daniel's voice was steady, almost emotionless. It's me. Silence on the other end. The kind that carries history. We heard you disappeared, the voice said carefully. I did. Another pause. What changed? Daniel looked down the hallway toward Tyler's empty bedroom. The door slightly open. The bed unmade from that morning. They took my son. The air on the other end seemed to tighten. You want official support? No. You know what this means if you cross over. I know. A long exhale came through the speaker. Then this call never happened. It didn't. The line went dead. Daniel set the phone down on the kitchen table. He walked to the sink, washed his hands slowly, methodically, like he was preparing for something routine. Then he dried them, turned off every light in the house, and stepped back into the garage. The steel hatch remained open. The ghost was no longer retired. And somewhere across the border, men who believed they were predators had just unknowingly awakened something far worse. The border at night was a different world. The official checkpoints glowed under floodlights miles away, but Daniel Mercer wasn't anywhere near them. He moved through a dry riverbed under a moonless sky, boots silent against cracked earth. The desert wind carried dust and the distant hum of trucks moving contraband along hidden routes. He wore dark civilian clothing, nothing tactical, nothing military. No flags. No patches. No identity. Just another shadow in a land ruled by them. But Daniel didn't belong to their world. He studied it. Hours earlier, he had analyzed the video frame by frame. The shadows, the echo of the room, the accent in the man's voice, even the pattern of rust behind Tyler's chair. He identified the region by the electrical wiring style and concrete texture common to certain rural compounds south of the Rio Grande. It wasn't luck. It was training. Years of it. The cartel thought they sent a threat. What they actually sent was intel. By midnight, Daniel had located the first safe house, a small stucco building disguised as an auto repair shop. Music played loudly inside. Laughter. Bottles clinking. 2 armed guards stood outside smoking, rifles hanging casually from their shoulders. They weren't expecting resistance. They weren't expecting war. The first guard never heard him. A hand over the mouth. A blade precise and fast. Lowered gently to the ground. The second turned just enough to register movement, but not enough to react. A suppressed shot coughed into the night. Quick. Clean. Efficient. Daniel dragged the bodies into the shadows and stepped inside. Within 3 minutes, the music stopped. Inside, men who had built reputations on brutality fell without understanding what was happening. Daniel moved room to room like a memory returning to muscle. Clear. Assess. Neutralize. No wasted bullets. No chaos. Just surgical silence. He accessed their phones, copied contact lists, mapped connections. Each piece of information fed him direction, deeper into cartel territory. By dawn, rumors began to spread. 2 more stash locations went dark before sunrise. Cameras malfunctioned. Guards vanished mid-shift. Radio calls ended in static. Panic whispered through encrypted channels. Some claimed it was a rival faction. Others believed it was federal forces operating undercover. But a few of the older members, the ones who had seen special operations raids years back, felt something different. This wasn't law enforcement. This was personal. And by the second night, they started using a name. El Fantasma. The ghost. They said he didn't shout, didn't leave messages, didn't torture. He simply appeared, and then you were gone. Daniel wasn't chasing noise. He was following the trail. Every captured phone, every intercepted message pointed toward a larger compound deeper inland, heavily guarded, recently active, and suddenly on high alert. More men were being called in. Heavier weapons distributed. Vehicles positioned defensively. They were preparing for an attack. What they didn't realize was, the attack had already begun. The compound sat alone against the desert horizon, concrete walls topped with rusted barbed wire, floodlights sweeping slow mechanical arcs across packed dirt. 2 guard towers overlooked the main gate. Armed men paced with the casual arrogance of those who believed they controlled the night. Pickup trucks were parked in defensive angles. Security cameras blinked red in the darkness. Daniel observed from a ridge nearly 600 yards out. Through thermal optics, he counted heat signatures. 17 armed personnel outside. Unknown number inside. One room, near the center of the structure, showed a smaller, restrained figure seated and motionless for long periods. Body temperature elevated from stress. Tyler. Daniel's breathing slowed. Wind direction, east to west. Guard rotation, every 12 minutes. Blind spots between floodlight sweeps, 4.7 seconds. He synchronized his watch. When the first tower guard dropped, it looked like he simply leaned back to rest. A suppressed round traveled clean through glass and bone before the echo could form. The second tower followed 30 seconds later. Daniel moved downhill as the body slumped out of sight. He reached the outer wall, scaled it using cracks in the concrete, and dropped silently inside the perimeter just as a patrol vehicle turned the opposite corner. 2 men near the trucks were mid-conversation when the lights cut out. Daniel had already located the external power box during surveillance. One shot. Total darkness. Shouting erupted in Spanish. Flashlights flicked on wildly, beams slicing through dust and confusion. That was their mistake. Light reveals position. Panic creates noise. Daniel moved through it like controlled gravity. One by one, shapes collapsed into shadow. Short bursts. Center mass. Relentless forward momentum. He didn't rush. He advanced. Inside the compound, alarms began blaring. Doors slammed. Boots pounded across concrete hallways. The cartel leader, a thick-built man known for public executions, barked orders from inside a fortified office. He demanded Tyler be used as leverage. A shield. A bargaining chip. But Daniel was already inside the building. He cleared corners with lethal efficiency, muscle memory guiding him through tight hallways and metal doors. When 2 gunmen burst from a stairwell, he pivoted and dropped them before their safeties clicked off. A third tried to flee. Daniel disarmed him, extracted information in seconds, and rendered him unconscious without killing him. Where is the boy? Central room, reinforced door. Daniel didn't hesitate. He breached the room with controlled force. The door splintered inward. Tyler flinched at the noise, eyes wide in terror, until they locked onto a familiar silhouette standing in the smoke. Dad! Daniel crossed the room in 3 strides and cut the restraints with a blade he'd carried since his first deployment. He dropped to one knee, checking for injuries, scanning for trauma. Tyler's voice trembled. I knew you'd come. Daniel placed a steady hand on his son's shoulder. I always will. Gunfire echoed down the hallway. Heavy. Organized. The leader wasn't running anymore. He was coming. By the time the sun rose over the Texas horizon, Daniel Mercer was back home. Tyler was asleep in his own bed, exhaustion finally overtaking adrenaline. The house was quiet again. The same refrigerator hum, the same ticking wall clock, the same porch light turning off automatically at dawn. If someone drove past, they would have seen nothing unusual. Just another peaceful home in a small American town. But Daniel hadn't slept. He sat alone at the kitchen table, a cup of black coffee untouched in front of him. The television played softly in the background. Breaking news banners flashed across the screen. Major cartel network dismantled overnight. Multi-agency operation leads to mass arrests. Officials credit coordinated intelligence breakthrough. Footage showed federal agents raiding properties across the border. Warehouses seized. Leaders in handcuffs. Bank accounts frozen. Commentators praised the precision of the operation. How every major player seemed to be exposed at once. Daniel didn't smile. Because he knew it hadn't been luck. Before leaving the compound, he had accessed their encrypted server. Downloaded financial ledgers. Route maps. Names of buyers on U.S. soil. Politicians. Business fronts. Corrupt officials. He didn't just rescue his son. He lit a fuse. And now the explosion was echoing through headlines. Tyler walked into the kitchen mid-morning, quiet but steady. He hugged his father without saying a word. Daniel held him tighter than usual, just for a second longer than normal, then released him like everything was back to routine. No war stories. No explanations. Just pancakes on a Saturday morning like always. But beneath that calm surface, Daniel's mind was already calculating. Because organizations like that don't collapse quietly. They fracture. They retaliate. Late that evening, long after Tyler had gone back to sleep, headlights rolled slowly down the gravel road toward the house. 2 black SUVs stopped outside. Engines idling. Windows tinted dark. Daniel was already standing at the door before the knock came. 3 controlled taps. Not random. Professional. He opened the door to find 2 men in dark suits, posture straight, eyes assessing. Not local law enforcement. Not FBI. Higher. The older of the 2 studied Daniel carefully before speaking. We know what happened across the border. Daniel didn't respond. The man continued, voice calm but weighted. You left fingerprints in places you didn't realize. A pause. Then he extended a thin classified folder. There's something bigger moving through the southern corridor. What you disrupted was just one branch. Daniel's eyes dropped briefly to the folder. Satellite images, redacted names, familiar patterns forming again. The man's voice lowered. We didn't come here to arrest you. Silence stretched between them. We came because we need someone who knows how to operate without recognition. Without hesitation. The porch light buzzed faintly overhead. Wind moved through the American flag beside the door. Daniel looked back down the hallway toward his son's room. Then back at the folder. The ghost had stepped back into the light. And the world had noticed. Daniel didn't reach for the folder right away. For years, he had buried that part of himself, locked it under concrete and routine, under baseball games and bedtime stories. He told himself the war was over, that ghosts belonged in the past. But evil doesn't retire. It waits. And sometimes, it comes for your family. He looked down the hallway one more time. Tyler was safe, breathing steady. Home. That was all that ever mattered. Daniel stepped forward and took the folder. Not for revenge. Not for glory. But because some men don't get the luxury of staying ordinary. Some men are built for the dark, so others can live in the light. The black SUVs pulled away minutes later, disappearing into the Texas night. And inside that quiet little house at the end of the gravel road, the porch light stayed on. Because the world may never know his name. But somewhere out there, the ghost was back. United States Fire.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.